My fiancée slept with my cousin days before our engagements, so I vanished without a word, and what happened next left them both shocked. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I genuinely believed I'd found the love of my life. Her name was Natalie, and from the moment she walked into my world, everything seemed to make sense for the first time in years. She had that kind of warmth that could quiet a storm-soft laughter, gentle eyes, and a way of making every room feel brighter just by existing in it. I'd spent most of my 20s trying to fix myself, burying the loneliness, patching the holes left by bad relationships, and then she appeared. Suddenly, I wasn't broken anymore, or at least that's what I wanted to believe. Our love story wasn't some wild whirlwind, it was slow, patient, almost cinematic in its quietness. Dinners that turned into midnight drives. Long talks about the future that felt like promises we were already keeping. My parents adored her. Even my friends said she was the one. And my cousin Ryan, my best friend since childhood, welcomed her into the family with open arms. He'd joke around with her like an older brother. And I remember thinking how lucky I was that everyone fit together so perfectly. We were weeks away from our engagement party, and I'd planned everything down to the smallest detail. I wanted it to be unforgettable, a moment where I could finally say, I made it. I found my person. I even roped Ryan in to help with the logistics, because he was the kind of guy who could make any plan work. Looking back, there were tiny moments that should have made me pause. The times she'd get quiet when he texted, or when they'd exchange inside jokes I didn't understand. But love makes you blind, doesn't it? I brushed everything off as coincidence, too wrapped up in the fantasy I'd built. I thought nothing could ruin what we had. Ryan wasn't just my cousin, he was more like my brother. We grew up on the same street, shared every summer vacation, and had each other's backs through every fight, breakup, and dumb decision. He was the charming one. I was the quiet, driven one. Where I planned my life down to the hour, he lived entirely in the moment. That balance somehow worked, or at least I thought it did. When I introduced him to Natalie, they hit it off right away. She said he reminded her of me, but more relaxed, and Ryan teased her for choosing someone so serious. I'd laugh it off, telling them, yeah, he's the comic relief in this family. The three of us would hang out constantly, movie nights, family dinners, weekend drives. There were times I'd come back from the kitchen and find them laughing about something I hadn't heard. It was harmless then, or maybe I just needed it to be. One night, over a few beers, Ryan told me, man, you've got it all figured out. She's perfect for you. His voice sounded genuine, but there was something in his eyes I couldn't place. Maybe admiration, maybe envy. I shrugged it off, patting his shoulder. You'll find someone like her soon. Our family adored him. They always did. My mom called him her second son. When we started planning the engagement party, it was only natural he'd help. He offered to handle the decorations and coordinate with the caterers, and I was grateful. Natalie seemed relieved too. She said it took some pressure off. Everything felt aligned. Family, love, future. I remember thinking, this is what peace feels like. But there was one small moment that still plays in my head. Ryan jokingly said to Natalie, if he ever messes up, you know where to find me. She laughed. Everyone laughed. I did too. But something about that moment felt off. I'd spent months preparing the proposal, down to the last second. I wanted it to feel like something out of a movie, intimate, meaningful, and unforgettable. Natalie loved quiet moments more than grand gestures. So I booked a private dinner overlooking the lake where we'd first talked about spending forever together. The plan was simple. I'd propose at sunset, and later that week, we'd surprise our families with an engagement party. It felt perfect. Every detail was a symbol of how much I believed in us. I remember holding the ring for the first time, small, elegant, and nothing flashy, just like her. I imagined her eyes lighting up, her hands trembling, the way she'd probably cry before saying yes. My heart raced every time I opened the little velvet box in secret, whispering to myself, "You're ready?" Ryan offered to help with the preparations. "Don't worry, man, I've got connections for flowers and catering," he'd said, clapping me on the back like always. I didn't even question it. He was my right-hand guy, best man, before I'd even asked him. Natalie seemed excited, but distracted lately. When I asked what was wrong, she smiled and said, "Just nerves, babe. I can't believe it's actually happening." I should have noticed the distance in her tone, the way she'd pull her hand away a little faster when I reached for it, or how she'd check her phone and quickly turn the screen away. But love has a cruel way of making you ignore the things that hurt. The night before the proposal, I remember lying awake rehearsing the words over and over, "Natalie, you're my home." I was so sure that moment would change my life forever, and I was right, just not in the way. I expected it happened 2 days before the proposal. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a call from a friend I hadn't spoken to in months, Mark, an old college buddy who still ran in a few of the same circles as Ryan. His voice sounded uneasy. "Hey man, this might not be my place, but I need to tell you something." I frowned, stepping outside to take the call. "What's going on?" He hesitated. I could hear him exhale sharply before saying it. "Ryan and Natalie. I saw them together yesterday. Not like cousins and fiancé kind of together. They were holding hands. At the Glenview Hotel." For a second, everything around me went silent. The city noise, the cars, even my own heartbeat. I remember leaning against a wall, trying to steady myself. "That doesn't make sense," I managed to say. "Ryan's helping me plan the proposal. That's impossible." Mark's tone softened. "I know what I saw, man. I thought maybe there's an explanation, but they looked close." He paused. "I wouldn't say this if I wasn't sure." I hung up before he could say more. My hands were shaking. My brain screamed no, but my gut whispered, "You already knew." All those late-night messages, the weird silences, the inside jokes, they started flashing back like puzzle pieces finally snapping together. That night, I tried to act normal. I cooked dinner, tried to start small talk. "So, where were you earlier?" I asked casually. She smiled, not even flinching. "Just running errands with your mom." Her voice didn't waver once. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But when she kissed my cheek and walked away, something in me broke quietly. It was the first time I looked at the woman I loved and saw a stranger staring back. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, calm, confident, lying without hesitation. The thought of her and Ryan together clawed at my chest until I couldn't breathe. By morning, I decided I needed the truth. No matter how ugly it was, I started small, checked our phone records, something I'd never done before. Dozens of calls, late-night texts, times that didn't make sense. I scrolled through our shared account and saw a message preview on her screen. I can't stop thinking about last night. My stomach dropped. I stared at it for minutes, my brain refusing to connect the dots. By noon, I drove to Ryan's neighborhood under the excuse of dropping off the engagement invites. His car was gone, but Natalie's sedan was parked discreetly down the block, the same car she claimed had engine trouble the day before. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands went numb. Part of me wanted to burst through the door, scream, demand answers. But another part, the quieter, colder part, told me to wait. To watch? To remember everything. After nearly an hour, I saw them step out together. Her hair was messy. His hand brushed her back like it had every right to be there. They looked comfortable, familiar, like a couple trying not to get caught, but too in sync to care. I didn't say a word. I just drove off, the ring box still sitting on the passenger seat beside me, mocking me with every bump in the road. That night, I sat alone in my car, staring at that tiny velvet box and whispering, "How could you?" The truth wasn't freeing, it was suffocating. Because once you see something like that, you can never unsee it. The next morning, I woke up feeling hollow, like something inside me had died quietly overnight. The world felt muted. Even the air seemed heavier. Every instinct screamed at me to confront them, to demand answers, to make them see what they'd done. But when I pictured it, Natalie crying, Ryan making excuses, my family taking sides, it all felt meaningless. Nothing they could say would undo the image burned into my mind. So I made a decision. I wouldn't fight for closure. I'd take it by leaving. I spent the day in silence, moving through my apartment like a ghost. I packed only the essentials, a duffel bag, my passport, and the laptop I used for freelance work. I left behind everything else: clothes, the ring, the life I'd built around a lie. I canceled the engagement venue, called my boss, and told him I needed a break for personal reasons. My voice didn't even crack that night. I drove for hours without a destination, headlights carving through the darkness. I stopped at a rest area just before sunrise, staring at the horizon bleeding orange and red. I took out a piece of paper and wrote 4 words. Don't look for me. I left it on my kitchen counter back home, addressed to both of them. It wasn't anger driving me anymore. It was clarity. They wanted secrecy. I'd give them silence. They wanted control. I'd take it by disappearing. I switched off my phone, withdrew all the money from my account, and booked a one-way bus ticket to a coastal town 3 states away. I didn't tell a soul where I was going. No goodbyes. No explanations. As the bus pulled away, I watched the city shrink behind me, my reflection trembling in the glass. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace, but I also knew this silence would haunt them more than any confrontation ever could. Days turned into weeks, and the silence I left behind began to echo louder than any argument could have. I'd settled in a small coastal town, the kind of place where no one asked questions and the sea drowned out your thoughts. My days were quiet coffee at sunrise, long walks along the pier, freelance work in the evenings. But every night, I'd check my burner phone, scrolling through unread messages from people I used to know. My parents, friends, Natalie, even Ryan. Hundreds of missed calls, all unanswered. The first time I heard from my mother, her voicemail was shaking. Everyone's worried sick. Natalie says she doesn't know where you are. Ryan's been trying to find you. Please, call me. Her voice cracked at the end, and I felt guilt rise in my throat. But I couldn't bring myself to call back. Not yet. They needed to sit with the truth, the kind that burns when you finally face it. Through mutual friends, I started hearing whispers. The engagement party had gone ahead. Sort of. Guests showed up, expecting champagne and laughter, only to find confusion and chaos. My parents were humiliated. Natalie tried to play the victim, crying that I'd abandoned her out of nowhere. But someone, probably Mark, had leaked the hotel photos. Within days, everyone knew what she and Ryan had done. The perfect image they'd built collapsed overnight. I pictured them surrounded by shame and questions they couldn't answer. Ryan's business contacts pulled away. Natalie's parents stopped defending her. My silence had become their punishment, a mirror, reflecting everything they'd tried to hide. And while I was half a country away, walking along the shore with the wind in my face, I realized something terrifying and liberating at once. They couldn't hurt me anymore. But I also knew this wasn't over. Not yet, about 3 months into my disappearance. When life had finally started to feel quiet again, I got an email from an unknown address. The subject line read simply, "You should know the truth." My first instinct was to delete it. I'd spent months detoxing from all of it, the betrayal, the noise, the people who'd fed off my silence. But curiosity won. I clicked dot. The message was short, almost clinical. Attached were a few screenshots, medical forms, appointment confirmations, and one message thread between Natalie and a close friend of hers. My eyes locked on a single line that made my blood run cold. I can't tell him. He'll know it's Ryan's. Pregnant? She'd been pregnant. The dates aligned perfectly with the weeks before my proposal. And then the line that followed, "I took care of it before he found out," was the kind of quiet confession that rearranges everything you thought you understood about pain. I read it over and over, my hands trembling over the keyboard. The betrayal had already felt unforgivable. But this was something darker. She hadn't just lied. She'd erased a life to protect another lie. For the first time since leaving, I felt anger again, real, raw, boiling anger. I paced my small apartment, muttering to myself, she did this while planning our future. While wearing the ring I bought, the ocean roared outside my window like it was mocking me. I wanted to call her, to scream, to ask why, but I didn't. Instead, I sat down, opened a blank document, and started writing every detail, every memory, every red flag I ignored. It wasn't for revenge, not yet. It was to remember Dot, because now I knew the full truth. She hadn't just broken my heart. She'd destroyed something far more sacred. And that realization changed everything about what I planned to do next. After reading that email, something in me snapped, but not the kind that leads to rage or revenge. It was quieter, emptier. Like all the noise in my head had finally collapsed into silence. For weeks, I barely left my apartment. The salt air that once felt freeing now burned in my lungs. I'd wake up before dawn, stare at the ceiling, and wonder how two people I loved most could strip me of everything that made me human. Food didn't taste like anything. Music felt hollow. I'd sit by the window at night, watching couples walk along the beach, and think about how I'd almost proposed to someone who saw me as disposable. My mind would drift back to Ryan's smirk, Natalie's gentle voice, the fake comfort of what used to be home. I replayed every conversation, every laugh, every "I love you," trying to find the moment it all started to rot. Then one night, out of sheer weakness, I opened social media mistake I'll never forget. A mutual friend had posted photos from a family barbecue, and there they were, Ryan and Natalie together, smiling, her hand resting on his chest, wearing the same necklace I'd once given her. My heart actually hurt. It wasn't metaphorical. My hands shook so badly I could barely hold my phone. I threw it across the room, the screen shattering on impact. I fell to my knees, every ounce of grief, humiliation, and disgust pouring out of me all at once. For the first time, I screamed. Not words, just sound. A raw, animal kind of pain I didn't know existed inside me. That was my rock bottom. The night I realized I wasn't mourning a relationship anymore, I was mourning the version of myself that believed in people like them. And once that version of me died, something new started to take its place. The morning after that breakdown, I woke up on the floor with dried tears on my face and a quiet sort of exhaustion in my chest. But for the first time, I didn't feel empty. I felt done. Done with the pain, done with trying to understand, done with letting their choices define me. Something inside me finally clicked. I couldn't change what they did, but I could change what I did next, so I started small. I cleaned the apartment. I threw away the ring box, the photos, even the hoodie Natalie once borrowed and never returned. It felt symbolic, like shedding skin that no longer belonged to me. I found a local cafe that needed help with bookkeeping, and I started working part-time, talking to strangers again, hearing laughter. Even the mundane sound of clinking cups all reminded me that life didn't stop with betrayal. It just paused until you decided to press play again. Therapy came next. My therapist, an older man named Daniel, didn't sugarcoat anything. You can't rebuild from anger, he told me, only from clarity. At first, I hated hearing that. But over weeks, those words started to sink in. The rage dulled into focus. I began journaling pages upon pages of memories, realizations, and questions. Every word I wrote was like stitching a wound that had been bleeding for months. Eventually, I stopped checking for their updates. No more social media. No curiosity, just space. And strangely, the silence that once suffocated me began to feel like peace. Walking along the pier, I looked out at the waves crashing under the moonlight and realized something powerful. I hadn't lost everything. I'd just been freed from people who never deserved me. And that realization, it wasn't healing, it was transformation. But fate wasn't done with me yet. Because just when I'd finally moved on, the past came knocking dash. Literally, it was a quiet Sunday morning when I heard the knock. I'd grown used to the stillness of my new life, so when that sharp, desperate pounding echoed through my apartment, my first thought was that someone had the wrong door. But when I opened it, my heart froze. Ryan stood there, my cousin, my betrayer. The man I hadn't seen in 2 years. He looked nothing like the version of him I remembered. His hair was overgrown, dark circles carved deep under his eyes. The confident grin he used to wear had been replaced by something closer to shame. "Hey," he whispered, almost trembling. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. I just stepped aside, letting him in out of some mix of curiosity and disbelief. He sat on my couch, staring at his hands like they might tell him what to say. Finally, he blurted, "She left me, man. Natalie, she cheated with someone else, took my savings, and disappeared." He laughed bitterly. "Guess karma's got a messed up sense of humor." I stayed silent, letting his words hang in the air. He kept talking how everything had fallen apart after I vanished, how their families turned on them, how guilt consumed him until it curdled into paranoia. "You were right to leave," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I just wish I'd been the one who disappeared instead." For the first time, I looked him in the eye. There was no anger left in me, just distance. I stood up slowly and said, "You taught me the cost of trust, but you also taught me the value of walking away." He tried to speak, but I opened the door instead. "Goodbye, Ryan." He hesitated, then nodded, tears welling. When the door clicked shut behind him, I didn't feel triumphant, just free, and somewhere deep down, I knew the universe wasn't finished delivering justice. Yet he didn't see Ryan again after that day. I didn't need to. The silence that followed was the kind I'd been chasing since the night I drove away from everything I once loved. For the first time in years, my mind was quiet, not empty, but peaceful. I sat by the window that evening, watching the ocean turn gold in the fading light, and realized something I hadn't before. I didn't win by forgiving them. I won by not needing to. In the weeks that followed, old memories resurfaced not as daggers, but as lessons. I remembered how naive I'd been, how much of myself I'd poured into people who never deserved it. I wasn't angry anymore. I was grateful, because if they hadn't betrayed me, I never would have learned how to stand alone. Months later, I got one last message. It was from Natalie. The subject line read, "I owe you an apology." The body was short. I lost everything. I miss who we were. I hope you're happy. I stared at it for a while before deleting it without replying. Not out of spite, just clarity. Her words didn't matter anymore. She was talking to a version of me that no longer existed. Now, when I look back, I don't see a story of heartbreak. I see a story of rebirth. Betrayal stripped me down to nothing, and in that nothing, I rebuilt myself, stronger, quieter, sharper. I learned that sometimes revenge doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from absence, from living well in the spaces they can't reach. The world kept spinning, the waves kept crashing, and I kept moving forward. And every now and then, I whisper to the wind a truth that once felt like survival, but now feels like power. They broke me once, but losing me broke them forever.